familiar to them, Odd Village, a place none of them had ever thought they'd visit. The Singh family received them quietly, their eyes filled with hesitation and confusion. Tichu was playing on the front porch at the time. The moment he saw them, he froze. His gaze shifted from playful innocence to an eerily serious expression. Slowly, he walked toward the unfamiliar woman, looked up at her, and softly said,
Just tie your hair away. Why have you gotten salted?
The mother stood speechless. No one said a word for several seconds. The air seemed to thicken, as though time had stopped. Then Tichu turned and hugged the two children who had come with her, calling them each by names that were the symphony he'd never heard before. And then, like a dam breaking, when he began to speak, as if the word memory had never reached.
Radio still there? I used to hide it behind the curtain when it rained. Took a wooden chair from the corner of the shop. I used to nap on it in the afternoon. The cat still meow in the courtyard like before.
Suresh's brother and both children sat in stunned silence, nodding tearfully at each detail. Tichu not only remembered the big things, he recalled the dishes Uma used to cook, the name of the maid who had put after the murder, and even the pet name Uma used to call her husband when she was upset. Uma broke down in tears, not out of fear, and not because she was instantly convinced of reincarnation, but because the voice she thought she would never hear again, the voice of her late husband, seemed to echo the words of his little boy. Tichu's parents, meanwhile, were caught in a haze of emotion and disbelief. They were afraid that what was happening might actually be real, and yet they also felt a strange sense of loss, like a part of their son no longer fully belonged to them. Tichu remained calm throughout. He wasn't excited or overwhelmed. He simply held Uma's hand gently and said,
That's someone else.
The encounter ended in tears, and without a shadow of doubt. What Tichu knew simply could not have come from chance. It certainly wasn't fed to him by adults, especially given that the Verma family had long cut all ties with the Bad region. The Verma family returned to Agra carrying a complicated feeling, part relief, part sorrow. Although their loved one could never return in full, they now believed that a fragment of his soul, a part of his love, still remained growing anew in the body of another child. Following the emotional reunion between Tichu Singh and the family of Suresh Verma, the story of the boy who recalled a past life spread rapidly across India and caught the attention of the international scientific community. Among those intrigued was Dr. Ian Stevenson, a Canadian-born American psychiatrist who had spent over 40 years researching the phenomena of reincarnation, particularly in children who need to remember past lives. Dr. Stevenson had documented more than 3,000 such cases worldwide and developed a rigorous methodology to assess the credibility of these claims. He placed a special emphasis on cases involving physical signs, such as birthmarks or deformities, that matched causes of death in the alleged previous life. Tichu Singh's case stood out because he had two distinct birthmarks on his head, corresponding exactly to the entry in basic Suresh Verma. This detail aligned with Suresh's official autopsy. Further investigating, Dr. Stevenson said let's remove from the mills. Apologies immediately on. Using Stevenson's method, Professor Mills could now Tichu's family. She confirmed that Tichu had provided numerous accurate details about Suresh's life, including the name of his wife, the names of his two children, the shop's location, and the circumstances surrounding the murder. However, not everyone was convinced. Some scientists argued that claims of reincarnation could be explained through psychological factors, such as a child's vivid imagination or subconscious influences from their environment. Others suggested that cases like Tichu's might be the result of random coincidence or unknowingly transmitted by adults. Nevertheless, Tichu one of the most compelling and well-documented examples supporting the possibility of reincarnation. It raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness, memory, and what if anything lies beyond death. Many years have passed since teacher Singham brought village shot in the National Research Community.
회심의 여지가 없는 거잖아. You're all I need.
And even a BBC documentary in 1990 all documented what
사랑은 절대적일 수가 없다고 그렇게 난 믿었었는데 유일한 사랑은 너 하나란 걸 나는 확신해. You're all I need. 너도 같다면 의심의 여지가 없는 거잖아.
You're all I need.
According to Casey, those 40 days are critical. If you're curious about the afterlife, if you've ever lost someone and wondered where they are now, or if you're simply seeking answers beyond what religion or science can offer, then stay with us. What you're about to hear might shake your beliefs, but it could also bring peace to your heart. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if your comment adds to the conversation, we'll mark it with a little
두
heart.
눈을
That's our way of thanking you for being part of this journey. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any revelations we share here.
기분 좋은 긴장감
Now,
내게 말해줘
prepare to discover what
tonight.
Edgar Casey revealed
널
about the soul's
알고
path.
싶어 따분할
Time seems
만큼
to stop, but awareness does not. Casey described it
이성적이었던
as a
너
sacred transition.
무너지고
Your heart is still, and
있잖아.
yet you are vividly conscious.
내 앞에 서면
But in a deeper, penetrating awareness,
생각도 멈춰. 사랑에 빠지는 건 바보 같다고 그렇게 난
strange kind of limbo.
믿었었는데 유일한 사랑은 너 하나란 걸 나는 확신해. You're all I need. 너도 같다면 의심의 여지가 없는 거잖아. You're all I
Its own
need.
higher self. Self is not bound by ego or illusion. It sees everything as it
너의
truly is.
눈빛과
That realization can be peaceful.
작은
Casey states
향기까지
that during the
다
first few days, the soul stays
나를
close to
간지럽히네.
wants to, but because it
모든
must,
신경이
it's part of the natural detachment process.
널 향해
It takes time for the soul to
유일한 사랑은 너 하나란 걸 나는 확신해. You're all I need. 너도 같다면 의심의 여지가 없는 거잖아.
You're all I need.
Some souls are shocked by what they see. Others feel liberated. But with belief that 10th day, another transformation begins. The soul starts encountering other spirits, some familiar, some not. These are not ghosts. They are conscious entities traveling their own spiritual paths. Conversations don't happen with words, but with thought. Telepathic communication, Casey said, is the universal language of the afterlife. In this realm, everything is energy. Your emotions, your thoughts, your memories.
기분 좋은 긴장감
So if you carry guilt,
내게
it becomes part of your
말해줘
environment. If you carry
tonight.
love, it
널
surrounds you like
알고
light. It's here that
싶어.
many souls begin to learn their
따분할
purpose. That
만큼
consciousness creates reality. Casey knew that some souls inside
이성적이었던
they
나
regret. They obsess over unfinished business.
무너지고 있잖아.
These souls can remain
내
in this
옆에
intermediate
서면
years, sometimes decades, until they choose
생각도
to release their attachments.
멈춰. 사랑에 빠지는 건 바보 같다고. 그렇게 난 믿었었는데. 유일한 사랑은 너 하나란 걸 나는 확신해. You're all I need. 너도 같다면 의심의 여지가 없는 거잖아. You're all I need. 너의 눈빛과 작은 향기까지 다 나를 간지럽히네. 모든 신경이 널 향해 있어. 사랑에 빠지는 건 바보 같다고. 그렇게 난 믿었었는데. 유일한 사랑은 너 하나란 걸 나는 확신해. You're all I need. 너도 같다면 의심의 여지가 없는 거잖아. You're all I need. 사랑은 절대적일 수가 없다고. 그렇게 난 믿었었는데. 유일한 사랑은 너 하나란 걸 나는 확신해. You're all I need. 너도 같다면 의심의 여지가 없는 거잖아.
You're all I need.
Stay in the spiritual realm. emphasized that nothing is forced. The soul always chooses. In the final days of this 40-day journey, most souls have made their choice. Those who remain in the spiritual world often enter what Casey called the soul group, a community of spirits who evolve together, lifetime after lifetime. This group serves as your spiritual family. You've known them before, you'll know them again. Some were your parents, some were your children. Others were strangers who showed up at the exact moment you needed them. It's not coincidence. It's design. The soul begins to understand that love, not knowledge, is the ultimate currency of the universe. Everything else, power, success, even pain, fades. But love remains. That love becomes the bridge to the next phase. Whether that phase is rest, rebirth, or ascension depends on the soul's evolution. But by day 40, the journey that began in silence and confusion ends in clarity. The soul is no longer afraid. It is no longer alone. It knows. Once the 40th day arrives, something shifts permanently in the soul's energetic structure. It's as if a door closes and another one silently opens. Casey emphasized that by this point, the soul has either aligned itself with its next phase of growth or remained in a cycle of confusion, still attached to earthly concerns. But for the soul,
What is the soul? Is the soul immortal? I very strongly believe this is a question for neuroscience. That is, it's obviously there are theological answers to this and there are philosophical answers to this. But neuroscience also addresses these issues. There are three questions that I want to ask today about the human soul. First of all, does the soul exist as something separate from the brain? The current materialist way of looking at things is that all of our mind is just from the brain. And if it does so, then what is the soul? And is the soul immortal? I very strongly believe that this is a question for neuroscience. That is, it's obviously there are theological answers to this and there are philosophical answers to this. But neuroscience also addresses these issues, and it does so, I think, in a fascinating way. The first question, does the soul exist as something separate from the brain? And I'd like to start with my own story. I started out as a materialist and an atheist as a young man. And in medical school, I fell in love with neuroanatomy and neurophysiology because I thought that learning about the brain, learning all the detailed, beautiful neuroanatomy would really help me understand who I was and understand what it was to be a human being. I trained in neurosurgery at the University of Miami and have been at Stony Brook faculty there since 1991, and I've done about 7,000 brain operations. And I've learned a fair amount in not only academically, but just in personal experience as to how the brain works and how the mind relates to the brain. I saw a number of things over my career that made me question the traditional materialist way of understanding how the brain works. The patients I'm going to show you are real people that change their names, but they're very real people. The picture on, I guess, on the left is an MRI of the brain of a young lady. In black there is spinal fluid. The brain is the gray stuff there. She's missing about 2/3 of the brain. That's why she was born. The image alongside of it is a normal brain for comparison. When she was a young baby, we scanned her and found this and were rather pessimistic in her family about her chances of having a normal life. She grew up a completely normal person. She was on the honor roll in high school. If you met her today, you'd say, she's a very young lady. She's perfectly fine. Missing 2/3 of her brain. This is a little boy named Joshua. He was born missing also about 2/3 epilepsy. And he's devoted his career to studying epilepsy. And he asked a fascinating question. He said, why are there no intellectual seizures? When people have seizures, if they remain conscious during the seizures, they do one of four things. They'll have uncontrollable movements. Their arm will shake. They can have sensations like tingling on their skin. They can have emotions, powerful fear or laughter or joy. And they can have memories. You can have a seizure where you get this recurrent memory. But nobody ever has a calculus seizure. And nobody ever has a mathematics seizure where you can't stop doing long division. And Penfield said, that's really odd. If you can evoke all these other things, why can't you evoke abstract thought, reasoning, theology, philosophy, thinking about God? That doesn't happen from seizures. He said the most reasonable explanation is that that aspect of the mind isn't from the brain. He tested this further by intraoperatively with awake patients, stimulating the surface of their brain to map the brain, just like you would map a city, and to find out where different things were located, and then so he could protect them in removing epileptic foci. But he couldn't find any kind of abstract thought centers in the brain. There's a movement center, there's a sensation center, there's a visual center, there's a hearing center, there are emotional centers, there are memory centers. But there's no center for thinking abstractly. There's no center for reason. And he said, that's odd. That's the same thing that he found with looking at the kinds of seizures that come. Some of the most interesting work along this line has been done by Roger Sperry and his colleagues. Sperry won the Nobel Prize for this work back in the mid-20th century in operation for people who would have a seizure in one hemisphere of the brain that would spread to the other hemisphere. And these were catastrophic seizures that were very difficult to control. So what Sperry, an operation that was developed, not by Sperry, but by others, was to cut the brain in half, essentially, so that the seizure started in one half of the brain couldn't spread to the other half, and that made the seizures much easier to control and much milder. And it was called a corpus callosotomy, and we still do that surgery today. So the hemispheres of the brain are functionally disconnected. And Sperry was a neuroscientist realizing he could study what each hemisphere does because they're disconnected. So he did a lot of wonderful work. Left hemisphere controls speech, right hemisphere controls spatial orientation, and he got the Nobel Prize for that. But one thing that he noticed, and I've noticed too, is that people who had their brains cut in half, because you meet these people with brains cut in half, and they're walking, talking, they have less seizures than we used to have. It would be the same thing as if someone just took a chainsaw and put a laptop in half, and it still worked just fine. Like, there's something odd about this. The follow-up research on that is something that still gives me chills. And I learned about this decades ago. I think it's fascinating to see science. To see a surgeon saw both the baseball and the window. So there's something in the mind that's not in the brain. Dr. Penfield also studied free will. And he did a very interesting study. During these awake brain operations, he would stimulate the surface of the patient's brain, and if you stimulate the right place, you can make them do things like make them raise their arm. He would ask them during the surgery to occasionally raise their arm themselves without him stimulating them. And you can't feel your brain. Your brain has a sensory instead of think about walking across the road and say,
don't know if I was aware a piece was missing. In this puzzle I use for us to come around. Better late than never, for all that was lost once again be found. Yeah, baby, it's clear for all to see that 1 and 1 makes 3 perfectly. Better late than never for you and me. Now it all has changed for the better, even in ways I never knew were there. Changed me, baby, cliches were true to that letter. Yes, they were, baby. From nothing to something, suddenly you were there. Better late than never for us to come around. Better late than never for all that was lost once again be found. Yeah, baby, it's clear for all to see that 1 and 1 makes 3 perfectly. Better late than never for you and me. Better late than never. Wouldn't you agree? Better late than never. I guess it was simply meant to be. Better late than never
Still alive, is here.
for us to come around. Better late than never for all that was lost once again be found. Better late than never for us to come around. Better late than never. I guess it simply was meant to be. And it's clear for all to see 1 and 1 makes 3 perfectly. Better late than never for you and me, baby, for you and me. Oh, for you and me, baby, for you and me.
So obviously, if you have brain injury, you can have changes in the way you behave. But that doesn't mean that every aspect of the mind comes from the brain. A question that is being asked, particularly nowadays with AI, is the mind a kind of computation? And no, it's not. It's not a kind of computation for a very simple reason. Everything in your mind is pointed at something. It has a meaning to it. Right? When you think, you always think about something. You can think about Dallas, think about a laptop, think about your family. But nothing in computation has any aboutness to it. That is a word processor, a word processing program. It doesn't care about your opinion in the essay you're writing. You can write a pro essay and a con essay, it doesn't matter. Computation has no aboutness. A camera doesn't care whether you're taking a picture of a sunset or a picture of a snow scene. Care less. So computation has no meaning in it. The only meaning is what we ascribe to. So not only is the mind not the kind of computation, it's the opposite of computation. And you can study the brain as if it were a computer. But that's just an artificial framework you're imposing on the brain. But the mind is not a kind of computation, it's the opposite. Then you can ask the question, did the mind evolve? I don't really think that anything evolved, but I certainly don't think that the mind evolved. And the reason is very simple. the brain the organ of the mind? Seem like a crazy question. That's not crazy at all. Because our capacity for reason, our capacity for free will, can be evoked from the brain. So we have this capacity. So I think the most reasonable scientific conclusion is that the brain is the organ of perception, memory, and emotion. Those definitely come from the brain. No question about that. But there is no organ. Now, the brain in some sense is necessary for normal functioning of the intellect. That is, you're not going to be able to think too clearly about calculus if you're just going to hit on the baseball brain. And your will can be affected by alcohol, which affects the brain. But that doesn't mean that your intellect and your will come from the brain. Because there's a ton of scientific evidence that they don't come from the brain. So, the first question we ask is, does the soul exist? And the answer is yes, the soul exists. The soul is what animates a human being. Our soul is everything that makes us alive. So, part of the soul is brain activity. Sensing.
Is the scientific evidence for the soul overwhelming? Our guest today is a former materialist who rejected belief in the soul, but because of his work and research as a surgeon, he now believes the scientific evidence is compelling. Why did he change his mind, and what is that evidence? Well, you're about to find out. We welcome for the first time Dr. Michael Egner, author of the new book that I endorsed and found fascinating. It's called The Immortal Mind. Dr. Egner, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, the book starts with this fascinating, jarring story that when I read it, I went to my wife and I was like, you've got to hear this story. It's somewhat of a conversion story before you get into the scientific evidence for the soul. Since you start the book there, let's start this interview with your powerful conversion story.
Sure. I was born into a kind of a non-religious family as a child, and I fell in love with science at a very early age. And I thought that all the mysteries of life, all the really meaningful things that one could discover with science. So I believed in the Darwinian way of understanding man and physics and chemistry and all those things. And I majored in biochemistry in college, and I wanted to be a doctor, and I really wanted to be a neurosurgeon because I wanted to understand the brain and the mind, because I thought that I would understand on a deep level who we are if I knew all the science that was about the brain. So I graduated from medical school, I trained in neurosurgery, and graduated from my residency in 1991, and went out and practiced as a neurosurgeon. And a number of things happened to me as a neurosurgeon and as a husband and a father that changed the way I look at the world. As a neurosurgeon, I began finding patients who had large parts of their brains missing. Examples of a girl who only about half her brain. And I counseled her family, and this didn't look good. I couldn't be sure how she would do. It didn't look encouraging. And as she grew, I followed her, and she was normal at every stage of development. In fact, rather bright. She's now in her mid-20s and a vibrant, normal young woman, has a great job. Her mother says she's too smart for her own good, and she has half a brain. I have a number of other patients with major parts of their brains missing who are really okay, really fine. And that didn't fit any of the neuroanatomy textbooks that I read in medical school. There are strange things that go on. The whole thing kind of came to a head when I was operating many years ago on a woman who had a brain tumor in her left frontal lobe. And we do awake brain surgery at times. And what awake brain surgery means is that the patient is given a local anesthetic like Novocaine, so they don't feel pain. The brain itself has no sensation. It's just like cutting your hair. You don't feel anything. And we can stimulate the surface of the brain and get a map of the critical parts of the brain. So, for example, if I'm removing a tumor, I can find out what parts I have to protect and what parts I can safely remove to get the tumor out. So it makes the operation safer. So she was awake, and I was taking out the tumor and taking out much of the left frontal lobe of her brain, and we were having a conversation. And it was a perfectly normal conversation. It's the same kind of conversation you and I are having here right now, as your big part of the brain is coming out. And it didn't seem to make any difference in your conversation. Fortunately, because that was the whole point of the surgery, keep her healthy. And after that operation, I thought, my goodness gracious, you don't understand. There's something deeper here. Just not like textbooks that you take out those. And around the same time, I had religious struck me as pretty weak science. Pretty bad science. I didn't look at it that much. I just thought of all the scientific disciplines I knew, this is the one that was the least rigorous. But I have 4 kids. My youngest son, the first couple months of life, he was making eye contact. He wasn't behaving as if he understood my life. So I was quite frightened of it. We took him to some neurologists, and they said it was too young. So by the time he was about 6 months old, he still wasn't making eye contact. I was seeing that outside hospital. Never going to love my son. I'm never going to have my son love me. He's never going to know me. So after I saw the consult, it was late at night. There was a chapel in the hospital, so I was stopped by the chapel, and I went into the chapel, and I got down in front of the altar and prayed. And I said, God, I don't know if you exist. I don't make praying a habit, but if you do exist, could you take this away from me? This is something I can't deal with. I can't have my son be autistic and not know me. And I heard a voice, only time in my life I've ever heard a voice, and it was very clear, and it wasn't me saying it, and the voice said, that's what you're doing to me. So I said, I kind of collapsed, and I said, okay, I won't do it to you, I won't be autistic to you, but please make my son not autistic to me. So I went home, and a few days later was his 6-month birthday, and he was really fun. He's currently
scientists and humanists trying to manufacture the story or no issue to it. It's just the facts. We start, I want to be really clear with you guys. I've explained mathematical points, so let's say oh yes, I really do believe that.
My name is Dr. Sean George. I work as a consultant physician and head of Department of Internal Medicine at Calgary Hospital.
Dr. Sean is quite a remarkable human being. He's always maintained some of the highest professional standards. Very knowledgeable. More importantly, I think he connects to his patients, so that's important.
He's part of the community. Like Australia, we live in two different worlds. Metro's over there and we over here. And people like Sean, like Australia, you know.
Certainly we have a very special relationship. We are best friends more than a husband and wife.
We've been married for the last 27 years. We have a son. His name is Michael. He's 21. I got that right.
Something I look towards in my dad to aspire to be is to put God first in my life as he does. My mom is the most kind-hearted person I know. They're such amazing people. They always have time for each other as well.
I think the most special thing for us is the morning quiet time that we have together, where we read the Bible and spend time praying together before we start the day, and that's wonderful.
And sharing their roles in adulthood.
I work in the emergency department at the hospital in Calgary.
It's actually really good that both of us are doctors because we come across life and death almost on a daily basis. That's when we can really extend a loving hand to each other and support one another. It seemed like a very normal day to me. It was the 24th of October 2008. We normally do about 5 diabetes clinics a year to Esperance, which is about 400 kilometers along the coast. And on Friday morning, I was returning home, and that's when everything happened. We started our journey at about 9:30 in the morning. It was not too long into the journey that I began to experience discomfort in my chest. It was not a pain, but it was just a slight discomfort, and I thought, oh, it must be something that I ate. So I continued to drive. My intern had actually never driven in Australia. I had driven almost 350 kilometers. I began to actually feel a bit of nausea. So I decided to actually stop the car on the side of the road. That's the first time I was telling my intern that I had discomfort in the chest. Now an intern is a newly graduated doctor, and that's the first job they're doing as a doctor. So the moment I actually told her that I had discomfort in my chest, she almost became white. And we're in the middle of nowhere in the outback. There's nothing around to help. So I said, could you just check my pulse? Because that's about the only thing that she could probably do in the middle of nowhere. In a situation like this, if you're having a heart attack, sometimes your pulse rate will be very high. So she checked my pulse and it seemed fairly normal. I was not convinced at this stage that it was indigestion. I thought there's something much more sinister. So I decided to get out of the car and I wanted to call my wife Sherry.
I had gone to my friend's house to do some study, and that's when Sean called.
And I told her, look Sherry, I'm having a bit of discomfort in my chest. I'm not feeling that great. We're about 80 kilometers from Kalgoorlie and I'm just about to turn into Kambalda.
I remember asking him, do you have chest pain? And he said,
I don't feel too bad, but I do have the discomfort. I'm feeling a bit of nausea.
So I said, oh, do you think you'll be able to drive up to the hospital? And he said,
yeah, I think I can definitely drive. And she said, okay, I'll inform your colleague, Dr. Praveen Shetty, who is the consultant who works with me. And so she said,
I will see you at the hospital. Why don't you come straight there? And that was the plan.
I hopped back into the car and I turned into Kambalda and I started to drive down that road. But while I was traveling on that road, I really felt a deep conviction in my heart that I need to actually get into the clinic at Kambalda. Now Kambalda is a small mining town and there's a small family practice or general practice in that town. It was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Unfortunately, the doctor had actually gone for lunch. So as I stepped into the clinic, there was the receptionist and the nurse, and I explained to them who I am and could I please have an ECG done. And they said, yep, no problem, come with us. And they actually did an ECG for me. And they actually handed the ECG over to me. Now, that's very unusual because normally, as a patient, the doctor will read the ECG. But because the doctor was out to lunch, they handed me the ECG because I was both the doctor and the patient. And if you look at this ECG, you will see that in lead 2, lead 3, and ABF, there's what we call as ST segment elevation. What it really means is that I was having a heart attack in the inferior wall of my heart. Now, you can imagine, I was looking at my own ECG. I said, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. You know, that might seem really strange, but remember, I'm a doctor and I know exactly what that means. At this stage, I was getting very anxious, and that's the honest truth. Because I was not looking at someone else's ECG, I was looking at mine. Basically, at that stage, I started to actually have quite a lot of chest pain. And I told the nursing staff, can you please call the doctor who's at lunch and ask him to come because I need help. When he saw me, he said, Sean, you're only 39 years old. There's no way that you're having a heart attack. You're probably having indigestion. I know that he was actually trying to calm me down because at that stage, I was really getting stressed out and the pain was getting more and more. So when the doctor actually came, he said, let's go to the next room and let me do another ECG for you. And took me to the next room, and it so happened that that was the resuscitation room. I saw that right next to the bed, there was the resuscitation trolley, and on top of the trolley was the defibrillator machine. So I lay down on the bed there, experiencing quite a lot of chest pain at this time. And they were actually hooking me up to the monitor, and they gave me a shot of morphine, and still the pain was actually quite severe.
I hadn't heard from him for a while, so I just thought I'll find out how he's doing, and I called him, and the intern actually picked up the phone, and I said, can I talk to Sean? And she said, oh, can you call back a little later? And I said, no, I want to speak to him now. And I got the call, and he said,
Sherry, I'm actually in Kambalda Health Center now. I've actually done an ECG and I'm having a heart attack.
I just couldn't believe what I heard.
She was obviously quite shocked by that. And I said, look, they will bring me from the clinic by ambulance. I won't be driving anymore. Whatever you do, don't try and drive to Kambalda. Don't worry about me. Everything will be fine.
So then, here I was, I didn't know what to do. So I just rushed to the hospital to find Dr. Shetty, to tell him that Sean was going to come because he wasn't well.
As I was laying down on the bed, I noticed that my pain was getting worse. I looked at the heart monitor and I noticed that my pulse rate was going up. My blood pressure was actually going up. Thinking to myself, that's not good. And that was the last thing that I actually remember seeing.
Received a phone call from Kambalda. I was told that he'd had a cardiac arrest. That was quite concerning to me, obviously. I didn't want to lose my friend, neither did I want to lose my head of medicine. So I went down to the emergency department. Dr. Steve Dungy was working there. He said Sean was had an arrest. I had a job to do.
Say my name, please tell me now. I'm feeling lost and let me know I'm meditating. Love fading out, I'm falling apart. I can't begin searching to saturate this. All this is drowning me, baby, can't you see this? Say you see more than you need, we're lost in love. Don't you care, yeah? All this faith, things will change, just a waste. There's just no one else, yeah. No one else but yourself. wanna have somebody find me one day. 주위 말들이 날 어지럽게. Let's not do another love song, baby. Can we find a love? Oh, just once I know. Living out and taking over. Digital love, I'm trying to take control. Living out and taking over.
What I was told by the doctors who were there on the day was that I actually had a seizure, and that was it. I was in cardiac arrest. So the doctor and my intern immediately, along with the nursing staff, started to do CPR until they could actually connect me to the defibrillator. While my resuscitation was actually happening in Kampala, Sherry actually received a phone call. Sherry, Sean's wife, was in Benhazen.
Dr. Shetty got the call and I think he didn't know what to say.
I just have something I want you to know. 주위 말들이 날 어지럽게 해도 Let's do another love song, baby. We can find a love. Oh, digital love is all just once I know. Living out, taking over. Digital love, I'm trying to take control.
Sean, a few minutes ago, I didn't realize that it was
So when they actually connected me to the defibrillator, they noticed that I was in a shockable rhythm, which was ventricular fibrillation.
When a person's got a heart and they initially go into cardiac arrest, the most common rhythm we see is something called ventricular fibrillation. It's chaotic electrical activity.
What you need to understand is when someone's clinically dead, they can still be in ventricular fibrillation because ventricular fibrillation means that there is no blood going out of the heart to the rest of the body. All the heart is actually doing is shaking. It's not pumping. So clinical death is not necessarily always a flat line as you see in the movie. It could be ventricular fibrillation, it could be pulseless ventricular tachycardia, or it could be a flat line. And sometimes there might just be a slight waveform, what we call as pulseless ventricular tachycardia. All of these scenarios mean the person is actually dead. So the whole purpose of a defibrillator is to try and shock the heart so that you can bring the patient back to life and restore the normal rhythm of the heart. Now, in the normal protocol of doing advanced life support or CPR, you don't just keep shocking the patient. You deliver a shock and then you do 2 minutes of CPR. The machine analyzes the rhythm and tells you whether a shock will be delivered. And usually people they get 1, 2, or even 3 shocks in the hope that people will come back to life. And sometimes you even give it. And I actually have the actual log of the defibrillator here. And you can see here the first shock was given at 13:44. Then you see the second shock at 13:46. And in between this time, they were actually doing 2 minutes of CPR.
The brain has a requirement from all oxygen molecules, and because when you're getting CPR, you're not getting the right amount of blood flowing through, cells start to die. As cells die, the chance
generally come around after a few shocks. That's when you normally get the good outcome. And then
cantando se alegra el cielito lindo, los corazones.
And it doesn't end there. The fifth, the sixth,
I remember being in the car and hearing the whole conversation between the intern and Dr. Shetty, and Dr. Shetty was trying to guide her through the whole thing.
the seventh. I was like, this person, no, it's not going to make it.
The doctors kept calling saying that we have tried. I said, keep trying, we're on our way.
Eight, nine. I was driving, wondering, how fast do I drive? What are we getting there for? What's going to happen when we arrive there? 10.
The time's just going on and I can hear Dr. Shetty saying, oh, so that many shocks are over and there's no response.
Well,
My mind, I was thinking, oh my god, what am I going to do?
13 shocks were given over a period of 48 minutes. But after 48 minutes, when the machine actually analyzed the rhythm, it did not actually recommend a shock, because from the state of ventricular fibrillation, I progressed into a flat line. It was on the flat line. You're not going to survive this. We call that flat line in medical terms asystole.
Asystole means there was not a skerrick of activity. His heart wasn't moving. It was just a dead heart.
As a doctor, I know there's nothing left. You know, time's going on, it's more than half an hour. And by the time we get to Kampala, it'll be at least an hour before we reach there. And Sean's been dead for 1 hour and nothing's going to happen. The biggest thing in my mind is how am I going to tell my child that he's lost his mother?
Sherry was really distraught. I had almost nothing to reassure her with. Things all looked bad.
I felt like I was all by myself because I didn't know what to do at that stage.
When Dr. Steve Dungy arrived in Kampala, the resuscitation had already gone on for well over an hour.
The entrance was into a crowded room where there were two paramedics taking turns to do CPR, and entirely like its body. A monitor that showed a flatline trace, which means there's just no electrical activity. It was like a scene from a film. There was a huge amount of tension.
I vividly remember the day. While doing the shopping, one SMS came. It was from Sherry. The message was, please call back immediately.
I was already in the car going to Kampala when he called and I said that Sean had arrested.
Was when she said, Sean is arrested. I thought police has arrested him. Then suddenly I thought probably he might have overspeeded or some rash traffic police has arrested him. So I told her, go and get a lawyer and get a bail for him.
He asked, what do you mean Sean's arrested? Did the police arrest him? And I thought to myself, what are you saying? And here I am trying to, it's a serious matter, but my dad thought that it was the police.
Then she told me, no dad, it is cardiac arrest. I'm going to get his body.
Even today I can hear my dad cry. He was such a loud cry and he said, no, that can't happen. I was crying myself and I was trying to hold myself all together because I was in the car with other people.
And Sherry's next to me. And she moved up and saying, here's what's happening.
What will I do? What should I do? That was a shocking moment. So just imagine a daughter asking her father, what should she do when she's going to collect her husband's body? It was a real shock to me. I didn't know how to answer. So I prayed to God, what answer should I give? I was crying and I told her, don't worry, God is in control of all situations. You go and pray.
I want you to go there and pray. And I thought to myself, you can't understand, I'm telling you he's dead. I'm going to collect the dead body. But then I thought to myself, after all, he's a godly man and he has said to go and pray. So there's no harm, I didn't have faith. But I thought in my mind, oh, okay, that's a good thought. No harm in praying and to see what will happen.
God gave me the courage to tell that to her.
I really thank God that He gave me that advice. I don't know deep down whether I would have done it myself. I didn't have the faith to believe that God would do it for me. I know God can, but would I have done it on my own? I don't know whether I would have.
I announced to the room that Sean was dead, and I said we were making the last couple of tests.
Doctors, everyone agrees. All the doctors there, one sort of, look, that's all we can do about this. If you've ever been in a resuscitation situation, you have to discuss that with everybody who's there. And my intern, she was really, really upset. Now, she knew that Sherry was actually on her way to the clinic at Cambalda.
The doctor said his wife's coming, and we want to get CRs, and she never liked it. I didn't think we need continuing things.
They decided that they would try another 2 cycles of CPR and they would actually completely stop the resuscitation.
At this stage, Dr. George's wife needed.
When we reached Cambalda, I was in such a bad state. I felt that I had no strength to even get out of the car.
When Sherry actually walked into the clinic, the doctors were standing back, except the doctor who was giving me some oxygen. Everybody else stood back, and the cardiac monitor was just a flat line.
She's a doctor as well, and obviously she understands the ramifications of what's in front of her.
And I walked into the clinic and I saw Sean lying there. He was white. Saying that body was very, very hard.
Sherry arrived, spoke to Sherry.
He held my hand and he said, Sherry, I'm sorry, but Sean's gone. You can go and say goodbye.
Remember, I was dead for an hour and 20 odd minutes by this time. So my body was actually cold.
I remember going and holding his hand, and it was so cold. And I have lost my best friend.
While she was there holding my hand, she remembered what her father told her in the car.
I remembered what my dad said. Go and pray.
Sherry, no one made me really send the prayers.
So I just held his hand and I said, God, he's only 39. I'm 38. We have a 10-year-old boy. I need him.
I heard a gasp. But almost simultaneous with that was this extra-added sound.
And then the next thing I know, there was so much of confusion, so much of noise, and I thought to myself, I'm just imagining, because that's what I would love to happen to me. I opened my eyes and then everybody said,
She was asked to move aside, and initially she was confused. Was she hearing this in her mind, or did my heartbeat actually come back?
and when I heard all that noise and all that commotion, then I looked up at the monitor and then I realized that Sean's heartbeat had come back. And when I heard the monitor with the beep, I just thought, oh, that's something very special.
It's not so puppet. So, whoa, that's amazing.
It's an amazing feeling to see the bugs coming back, to see the conditioning his bugs back. So 100%.
I turned around and his heart was beating very regularly in a rhythmical atrial fibrillation.
Obviously now they couldn't send me to the morgue, and so they started to actually work on me again.
Had to have been froth boil up the tube, and I started getting really enormous doses of adrenaline, keeping his heart going. And were you hopeful at that stage? To be honest with you, the doctors marked his
me, Dr. Shetty, and Dr. Ansel left in the cars, and Sean came by ambulance. And even on the way back, I was talking to Dr. Shetty, and I say, I really don't know what's going to happen ahead.
When I finally arrived at Calgary Hospital from Kampala, almost like a dead body, I was told that a lot of my friends, colleagues, nursing staff, they all came down to the emergency department and actually said goodbye to me.
Everyone who was anyone in the health department in the Goldfields was in the emergency department that afternoon. They wanted to be there as Sean was taken out to sort of pay their respects. So they've wheeled him out. I see them like push that in on the stretcher. He just had a lot of issues like almost like a guard of honor. These men lined up along the sides of the corridor. Sean's slowly. I had seen that once before in my work. There was an underground explosion, and it struck me that that's sort of what was happening here. They were saying, well, I suppose we all were. Because nobody expected him to live. Nobody expected him to survive or recover.
Michael was somebody who loved Legos, and I remember him telling me,
My simplicity, I said to Mom, I was like, Mom, don't worry, God's going to put the pieces together, you know, He can fix anything. And so that was my belief at the time.
At stage 5, many scenes I was struggling. Now, Calgary is a regional hospital. Ultimately, I would have had to be shipped to a big hospital in Perth. But something really strange happened. There was a massive hailstorm. Because of this hailstorm, they could not fly me. It's going to be some time before we don't get because Calgary is a regional hospital. We can't actually look at the artery supplying the heart. Put in a stent if it's required. The best that we can do is a
I remember Dr. Danji coming back and asking,
I said to Sherry, I'm going to give him some thrombolysis and I'm going to kill him. This is a blood-busting drug. I figured that was the best thing I could do in the circumstance, but there's pretty good evidence that if you use thrombolysis in this circumstance, it's burn or bust.
I remember telling him, God has done a miracle. I believe Sean will live. Let's just go ahead and do it.
She was confident that something amazing was going to happen. I felt like it was my job to kind of to dampen her enthusiasm because I was confident it wasn't going to be good to go. A strong heartbeat back, eyes clear, sense of life, that's really life. Basically, to imagine being at the airport.
To the cath lab.
They did an angiogram and they actually found that I had a block in my right pulmonary artery and they put in a piece of plumbing, we call it a stent. And finally it was in the early hours of Saturday morning that I was moved to the ICU at Royal Perth Hospital. Most likely, medically speaking, I was brain dead. This is a picture showing my kidney functions.
Associated with kidney problems and it's a shutdown.
Because the blood supply to all my organs was cut off for such a long time, I actually developed kidney failure.
So it's bad luck to kidneys. So they're going to shut down.
Liver also got damaged. You can see
So the concentration was low enough to cause significant damage to his kidneys. They're very durable. They do a lot better than people's brains do. A person's brain starts to die really fast.
you don't need to be a doctor to know how bad this actually looks. And if you look at this machine here, this is the machine that was actually doing the breathing for me. Because just remember, I am supposed to be brain dead. If my kidneys had failed, my liver had failed, I should have had no brain function.
I see that his liver's not working, his kidney is not working.
Remember, being both a doctor and a wife is a very difficult balance at the time.
The doctor lies with me says his brain should be affected.
Estar despierto contigo, vida al amanecer.
How righteous this is.
es lo mejor para mí, el despertar junto a ti. Penas y horas completas las haces desvanecer,
Medically speaking, this
como la
is horrible
lluvia de
because his brain should be
regresa el sol
100%
cada
dead.
vez.
I thought to myself, oh, I don't have to make the choice one day of having to say let's turn off the ventilator because he's going to be a vegetable. And how am I going to deal with that situation was going through my mind. There I was in Perth all by myself, didn't know anyone. And as I was going to Sean, I saw Dr. Christine and Jeffrey Stones waiting there because they had heard what had happened. And it was so nice to see somebody that I knew.
A donde vayas estar, sea París o Milán, Chihuahua o Culiacán.
Jeffrey actually anointed Sean's head with oil and prayed.
Estar despierto contigo, vida al amanecer.
Finding a church knew about it for a month. The other churches in Kalgoorlie, they knew it was Christian. But it was more than that.
Penas
Sean
y
and
horas
Sherry and
completas
Michael,
las
they
haces
very well known, very well
desvanecer,
respected.
como
All
la
over the world,
lluvia
there was
de
people praying.
regresa el sol cada vez. Siento mi amor.
Another reason I wanted you to look at this picture is this is what Sherry was actually looking at on Sunday morning, the 26th of October 2008, when she actually got a phone call.
I got a call from my aunt and to tell me that the lady had been praying and she had said that
Quiero estar
that
junto a
night
ti,
before I went to bed that Sean would open his eyes.
This particular day,
que sea pueblo
before Sherry goes to
ciudad.
sleep,
Si en el
I
bosque o en el
opened my
mar,
eyes.
quiero estar
You
junto a
tell me
ti.
if you were actually looking
A
at
donde
this picture,
vayas
would you believe that?
Thought to myself,
Sea París o
my
Milán,
aunt is not medical. She
Chihuahua
has
o
no
Culiacán.
clue. But Sean's so sick. But I just believed the message that she told me. And I thought, okay, tonight before I go to sleep, if Sean will open his eyes, that would be great.
On that evening, one of my colleagues, Dr. Christine Jeffrey Stokes, she came to visit.
Dr. Christine was there and Christine was actually talking to Sean.
Now, normal practice for children who are in that situation, and I'm really interested, is to talk to them about normal things. And so I started talking to him about just normal stuff, what the weather was like, what we were doing, how we were there.
And she then noticed that there was some flicker in my eyes, and she actually asked me,
A donde vayas estar, que sea pueblo o ciudad. Si en el bosque o
Sean,
en
if
el
you're there,
mar,
squeeze my hand.
quiero estar
And
junto a
apparently I
ti.
squeezed her hand, and then she actually shouted loud,
If you can hear me,
open your eyes.
Chihuahua o
in a
Culiacán.
moment, he just opened his eyes for like a few seconds. And I saw that, and then I remembered what that lady had said. And before I sleep on Sunday, Sean would open his eyes and that had happened.
Cried, we both cried. It was exciting and almost unbelievable.
The next day, I started to actually move my hands and my legs, which means that I actually had brain function.
On Monday, they started to wean him off.
And by Wednesday, they were actually able to take the tube out of my throat, and I began to breathe on my own, which means that my brain was functioning. But it's what happened next that shocked everybody.
I've really been shocked. It was, when we finished the rest of the story. So, I said, I spoke to a friend of mine. And so I just called him about Sean. How's it going? He said, well, the fact that he's such tremendous damage done to his liver and kidneys led to my next question, which was, what's his writing like? He said, how do you know? He said, well, just x-ray. I said, really? Because I was so certain that we're going to find it. And they said, yeah. He said, did you want to hear what his first words were? And I said,
came, I said, "Oh, can I have a look at my ECG and my ABG?" And she nearly collapsed.
Apparently, when the tube came out, the first words were, "What arterial blood gas is blood," which was just extraordinary.
That's a short thing, so medical.
Somebody told me the first thing he said was, "Show me my charts." It's short. People want to be in charge of that. My brain was 100% normal, which is just medically impossible.
It was amazing just that last Friday, somebody who was next to Wednesday, somebody who was talking like nothing happened. Again, I just wanted to pitch myself and see what is the
passing away. Lord Ian Blair passing away then, John.
I weren't exactly surprised when you said that you were leaving. Felt some abstract relief instead, now that we were even. If you're going, then hurry along. Don't drag your silly feet. Close the door behind you. Don't worry, I won't try to find you, but don't come crying to me when your whole world comes crumbling to your feet. No, don't come crying to me. Won't say I told you so. Don't even wanna know. Nothing's been great since you've been gone. I got some new stuff going on. I go out, I get around, making new friends all over town. You don't even cross my mind. It's starting to feel like some old Asian time. But don't come cry to me when your whole world comes crumbling to your feet. No, don't come cry to me. Won't say I told you so. Don't even wanna know. So don't come cry to me when your whole world comes crumbling to your feet. No, don't come cry to me. Won't say I told you so. Don't even wanna know. Won't say I told you so. Don't even wanna know.
Worldwide headlines, but his life was a complete mystery. I set out to discover who he was, why he'd taken on such a perilous journey, and what happened on that plane.
Estar despierto contigo, vida, al amanecer es lo mejor para mí. El despertar junto a ti, penas y horas completas las haces desvanecer. Como la lluvia de ayer, regresa el sol cada vez. Siento mi amor. Sin ti a ti. A donde vayas a estar, que sea pueblo, ciudad, si en el bosque o en el mar, quiero estar junto a ti. A donde vayas a estar, sea París o Milán, Chihuahua o Culiacán. Estar despierto contigo, vida al amanecer, es lo mejor para mí. El despertar junto a ti, penas y horas completas las haces desvanecer. Como la lluvia de ayer, regresa el sol cada vez. Siento mi amor. Quiero estar junto a ti, a donde vayas a estar, que sea pueblo o ciudad, si en el bosque o en el mar. Quiero estar junto a ti, a donde vayas a estar, sea París o Milán, Chihuahua o Culiacán. Quiero estar junto a ti, a donde vayas a estar, que sea pueblo o ciudad, si en el bosque en el mar. Quiero estar junto a ti, a donde vayas a estar, sea París o Milán, Chihuahua o Culiacán.
So tired that I just don't have any myself right now. And when I went back down, anything was down there other than I started hearing the nurse's voice, oh, are you back now? Are you back now? And I remember seeing like my eyelids just, like on the inside, almost like when you're waking up, started doing like that. And then I came back like fully aware. And that's when they put me like on a stretcher and stuff and brought me to another room and checked my pressure. And then soon after that, I was sent home. That was it. No other checking or anything, just sent home and then just given some instructions like if it happens again, just put her feet up, play with stuff. And so that was it. So we're like, okay, I get normal, right? So we went home and so that was now the 16th because it was like midnight. And then so my husband, like when I was on the couch, like laying down, he was making something, in the kitchen for me. I just started feeling, I'm passing way too much blood. Now this is irregular. And I'm getting into the graphics, the graphic
Kaku, renowned theoretical physicist and futurist, stepped onto the stage at a highly anticipated space science symposium in Geneva. He was known for his bold ideas and sweeping vision of the cosmos, but this time there was something in his demeanor, an urgency, perhaps even a tinge of unease, that immediately set the room on edge. The title of his presentation had already sparked waves of speculation. The moon, a paradigm shift in understanding. Most assumed it would be a discussion of past lunar missions or speculative talk of colonization. But what followed shook the scientific community and the broader public to its core. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Kaku began by unveiling new data gathered from a collaborative project involving international space agencies and quantum deep imaging satellites. These devices, recently deployed around the moon's orbit, utilize gravitational lensing and subsurface radar scanning that had never before been attempted at this level of precision. The findings were not only unexpected, they defied conventional models of celestial formation. The first bombshell, the moon's density readings were significantly inconsistent with its previously calculated mass and core composition. The instruments indicated vast internal cavities, some stretching hundreds of kilometers beneath the surface. These points were just natural hollows or lava tubes. Their symmetrical arrangement and regular spacing suggested structural integrity, engineered design. The moon, it seemed, was not entirely a natural satellite. Kaku stood still as the images displayed behind him. Symmetric patterns beneath the regolith, energy signatures that pulsed at regular intervals, sections that appeared to be reflective alloy buried beneath the dots of lunar dust. There was an audible shift in the moon's atmosphere. Scientists leaned forward, expressions caught. Kaku pressed on, revealing thermal imaging data that showed unnatural heat signatures emanating from beneath the lunar crust, specifically from these cavernous regions. Temperatures didn't correlate with volcanic activity or residual heat from the moon's formation. Instead, they matched patterns seen in orbit with spectacular reactor cores. This wasn't guesswork. The data was cross-verified from 3 independent space agencies across Europe and Asia. Something inside the moon was still giving off energy that shouldn't be there. Then came the gravitational anomalies. Since the early Apollo missions, small inconsistencies in lunar gravity had been noted but often dismissed as measurement errors or lower terrain effects. The new data, however, painted a different picture. Gravitational fluctuations were mapped in each one. They weren't random. They formed a grid-like pattern that correlated with the locations of the voids and geometric anomalies beneath the surface. This grid, stretching over the moon, suggested not only an artificial distribution of mass, but also a potential mechanism, perhaps ancient, perhaps dormant, that had once allowed the moon to regulate its position with far more precision than previously thought. Kaku didn't propose a definitive explanation. He refused to utter phrases like alien origin or artificial satellite outright. But the implications of his findings were clear. The moon, long thought to be a byproduct of a Mars-sized body colliding with Earth in the early solar system, might not be what humanity believed it to be. It could be partially constructed, a shell over something else, something ancient, something deliberate. The implications rippled far beyond the scientific world. If the moon was not a fully natural object, then the history of the Earth itself would need to be rewritten. The moon's gravitational effect on Earth is fundamental. It regulates tides, stabilizes our axial tilt, and affects biological rhythms across all living organisms. Its presence has played a critical role in the evolution of life. What if that presence wasn't an accident of cosmic mechanics, but a planned intervention? The room was quiet as Kaku laid out a hypothetical. Suppose an advanced intelligence had placed the moon in orbit. Such a feat would require unimaginable technological sophistication. The moon is disproportionately large compared to Earth compared to other planet-satellite pairs in our solar system. Its orbital mechanics are suspiciously perfect, an almost exact match in angular size to the sun during eclipses, creating total solar eclipses. For decades, this had been dismissed as a coincidence. But now, structural anomalies and unexplained internal energy patterns, that coincidence no longer seems so like the moon would not be bound by the physics as humanity currently understands them. It would be operating on a level that transcended current models. For the often referred to as a Type 2 or even Type 3 civilization on the Kardashev scale. Such entities wouldn't merely observe cosmic evolution, they would guide it, seed it, perhaps even curate it. He moved on to cultural implications, carefully treading the line between scientific discourse and philosophical inquiry. Throughout history, ancient civilizations have revered the moon with reverence that bordered on obsession. Myths across continents, from the Sumerians to the Mayans to the Egyptians, spoke of the moon arriving suddenly, or of moonless nights of forced appearance. Such stories have long disappeared and have formed myth, but now Kaku suggested that perhaps those ancient memories held more truth than modern minds were willing to admit. There was no trace of theatrics in his voice, only the weight of realization. The moon had been placed, deliberately positioned. What then was humanity's place in the cosmic narrative? Were humans the product of random evolution, or the intended result of environmental conditions optimized by external intervention? The moon's perfect tidal lock, its orbital synchronicity, its life-stabilizing effects, these weren't small accidents. They were planetary scale conditions that enabled civilization itself. How to transition from discussing Earth's scale. The age of the moon had always appeared slightly older than the Earth, a paradox in most formation theories. But if it were an inserted body, something that predated Earth's current biosphere, then the paradox resolved itself. The moon could have been introduced after Earth cooled, perhaps even with the express purpose of influencing the development of life. He refrained from stating any particular theory as fact. Scientific we are at the edge.
We've seen this week the spectacle of a state visit in Windsor. Now, with farewell to one leader, attention shifts to the arrival of another.
This is a letter from His Majesty the King. It's an invitation for Second State
But when those flags and replacements
Come on.
strike,
One,
there is
two.
one part of the usual state visit.
Hey stop 참 무책임해 왜 자꾸 들었다 놨다 해 헷갈리게 친절은 사양할게 오해하게 하지 말아요 날 yeah 들어봐 가뭄 같은 마음은 뭐라도 단비가 돼요 돼요 무의미한 말에 자꾸 내 맘이 설레요 그래요 아름다운 그대와 단둘이서 걷고 싶은데 에이, oh, oh. 많은 사람들 속에 난 그대만 보이네요 밤하늘의 별도 밝게 비춘 달도